This is Daniel Ken Holtzclaw, a police officer who used his power to sexually violate. His predatory spree happened between 2013 and 2014. Daniel, 36 years old, was accused of various criminal charges related to 13 different women. Holtzclaw abused his position as a police officer by conducting background checks on different women, victims of his abuse, to find useful information that would allow him to coerce them into having sexual relations with him. The trial was tumultuous and highly publicized. Out of the 13 women who accused him, several had criminal backgrounds related to drug arrests, and notably all the women were African American. Due to this, the defense arbitrarily questioned the credibility of the victims during cross-examination, unfairly bringing up their criminal histories and preying on sickening racial stigma. On the other hand, the prosecution argued that Holtzclaw deliberately chose those victims for the aforementioned reasons, exerting undeniable power dynamics. The victims' statements said it all.
I was violated in June by a police officer. He stopped me on 50th and Lincoln for no reason whatsoever, pulled me over and fondled me and did certain things to me. I was out there alone and helpless, didn't know what to do. And in my mind, all I could think that he was going to shoot me. He was going to kill me.
Incredibly, Holtzclaw pleaded not guilty to all the charges he was accused of. Nevertheless, due to the substantial evidence and testimonies provided, Daniel was found guilty. He was convicted on 18 out of the 36 charges, including first-degree rape, second-degree rape, sexual assault, forced oral sodomy, and lewd exhibition. In 2016, he was sentenced to 263 years in prison. It's truly shocking how apparent defenders of justice believe they're above the law, much like John Romer, a police officer who assaulted a man and lied under oath. It was the year 2016. John, a police officer from Fort Worth, was in a city hospital. This would be the epicenter of the conflict. What happened? Well, apparently, John had a strong altercation with a young man named Henry Newson. Naturally, the conflict went to trial. And here's the interesting part. John made a very crucial mistake. He lied under oath to the jury. His false words attempted to cover up his corrupt actions, and yet the truth came to light. Years had to pass for this case to be reopened. There was a lot of speculation, but the surveillance camera footage delivered justice.
Get down! Get down! Get down!
Off-duty Romer had used excessive force against Henry, who was only 20 years old, knocking him down in the process and continually beating him. The young man had previously been charged with breaking and resisting arrest, something that, with the new evidence, seemed entirely unfair. The charges against Henry were dropped. On the other hand, Romer faced his own sentence. He was convicted to 5 years in prison for perjury. Poetic justice for our corrupt policemen. Some officers just leave you thinking, how did they ever get a badge? Much like Zachary Wester, a crafty and deceitful police officer. Zachary, 28 years old, worked as a deputy for the sheriff in Jackson County. Now, the interesting part is what Wester was doing behind the scenes. Our shifty officer was accused of planting drugs in cars during traffic stops throughout his years of service. To be more specific, between 2017 and 2018. As you can see, this didn't last long. In 2019, he was reported and brought to trial, facing 67 charges including conspiracy, official misconduct, tampering with evidence, and unlawful detention.
Where it found Mr. Wester guilty of the following: Count 1, racketeering, a first-degree felony. Count 7, official misconduct, a third-degree felony. Count 9, official misconduct, a third-degree felony. Count 10, official misconduct, a third-degree felony.
That same year, he was found guilty of 19 of those charges and innocent of the other 48. He was sentenced to 12 years, 6 months, and 8 days in the Florida Department of Corrections. Even off-duty officers are not immune to the law, especially when it involves driving under the influence, like Dominic Colombo, a veteran police officer who was consumed by alcohol. In the early hours of January 1st, 2018, Dominic, age 39, was accused of driving under the influence and assault with a dangerous weapon. Now, what happened? Colombo, who was off-duty that early morning, was heading home from work when, due to the influence of alcohol, he crashed his truck into a car at the intersection of Columbia Road and Ceylon Street in Dorchester. The provided information states that Dominic was driving at approximately 65 miles per hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. The primary victim was Jose Teixeira, 21 years old. He was the passenger in the car that was hit by Colombo. At that moment, Jose was less than a mile away from his home when the accident occurred. Due to the accident, Teixeira fell into a coma for 2 weeks and spent 2 months in the hospital. He suffered significant internal injuries and even underwent cranial reconstruction. On the other hand, it was reported that the car's driver, although not as severely injured as Jose, was also hurt due to the accident. Medical tests conducted on Dominique indicated an excessive blood alcohol level of 0.125, while the legal limit for driving in Massachusetts was 0.08. Our alcoholic officer, with over 6 years of experience on the police force, was amazingly placed on paid administrative leave during the trial. In the end, he was charged with various offenses: assault with injuries using a firearm, driving under the influence causing serious injuries, negligence, and reckless operation of a motor vehicle. He was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison for his actions. Now, what happens when the sheriff is the offender, like Charles Reeder, who, due to greed, scarred his life forever and shed a few tears along the way? The Pike County Sheriff was accused of 5 charges. To name a few, we have theft and manipulation of records. Reeder used his advantageous position to steal and embezzle thousands of dollars that had been confiscated as evidence in other county police cases. Fortunately, his wrongdoing didn't last long. Charles was discovered and brought to trial. In this trial, without hesitation, he pleaded guilty to the charges.
I stood in this court on September 24th and pled guilty to the charges against me.
Due to his confession, Charles, in the eyes of everyone, turned into a vile thief. He openly wept in the courtroom, begging and pleading with the jury and the judge to sentence him only to community service and not send him to prison, as he wanted to attend upcoming family events, such as his son's graduation and his daughter's wedding.
Your Honor, please do not send me to prison. I have wronged, but I'm not ruined. I still have a lot of good left in me. And thank you for your time.
A childish and sly request. Fortunately, this emotional manipulation towards the judge didn't work. The sentence was firm and absolute. Judge Cosgrove sentenced him to 3 years in prison for charges of theft in office, manipulation of evidence, and conflict of interest. Some corrupt thieves not only target cash, but sedatives as well, like Marco Burke, a police officer who found exactly what he was looking for. Marco Burke was an officer at Middle Tennessee State University, MTSU. His story begins when the police chief, Buddy Peaster, started to suspect that Burke had stolen an AR-15 from a police locker at MTSU. Buddy enlisted the help of the Murfreesboro police. Together, they set up an undercover operation on the university campus. They simply had to set a trap and send Burke. You might wonder, what was the trap? Imagine an abandoned vehicle, and Marco Burke was sent to investigate it alone. Burke began inspecting the vehicle. Interestingly, his body camera caught him taking 2 bottles of OxyContin pills and $1,100 in cash from the vehicle. Here's where it gets ridiculous. Our officer called in and reported to headquarters that there was nothing unusual in the vehicle. Yes, you heard that right. Even though the camera had filmed everything, Burke reported and claimed to have found nothing. Obviously, due to this, Marco was arrested and brought to trial. And here's something even more curious. Before the trial, prosecutors pressured Burke to confess his involvement in the AR-15 theft. They hoped he would talk about what happened to the gun. Despite all of this, Burke denied any involvement. Because of this, he was never charged with the AR-15 theft. To this day, its whereabouts remain unknown. Still, Marco pleaded guilty to the other charges and now faces 3 to 15 years in prison. Some officers go one step further, like Caleb Rogers, an armed bandit addicted to gambling. What happened? Well, Caleb, 35 years old, was arrested after a trio of heists carried out at different casinos in February 2022. Making the case even more serious, he was an active duty patrol officer at the time of the heists. During the trial, he was accused of stealing approximately the hefty sum of $165,000 during this robbery spree. Obviously, due to all of this, Caleb was placed on unpaid leave without police powers. Rogers, who was employed as an active duty patrol officer at the time of the robberies, was placed on unpaid leave without police powers since his arrest. Adding fuel to the fire, Caleb's younger brother, Josiah Rogers, testified against him for over 3 hours, clearly and precisely detailing how they successfully carried out the series of robberies. Josiah confessed to participating only in the first robbery, claiming that his brother carried out the rest solo. Thanks to his testimony, Josiah obtained immunity from prosecution, a fair exchange. He gained his freedom, but he won the award for Worst Brother of the Year. Rogers was sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. Corruption taints the legal system and can leave you wondering, just like these cases.